Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Rotary E-Club District 7710. Wait a minute, I started over. Welcome to the program this evening. We have our guest speaker this evening is Dr. Harold Dorrell Briscoe. And Dr. Darrell Biscoe is a writer, a speaker, a pastor, and a public theologian. He focused on the internationality of race, religion, law, and power. He's married to Tracy and the father to Luke, Noah, Amelia, Hope, and Ella Grace. He is a 2007 graduate of the University of North Florida, where he earned his bachelor's degree in political science and history. He is a 2009 graduate of George Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M College. There he earned a master's degree in public administration with concentration on urban planning. Darrell worked in local and state government for 5 years across Florida, Texas, and Louisiana. Darrell also taught at the university as an adjunct professor and teaching public administration, management, and leadership to undergraduate students. While teaching, Darrell pursued and awarded a master's degree in theological studies at Liberty University in 2015. Darrell finished his Doctor of Ministry degree at Duke University in 2017. He has a strong passion for local church, politics, racial justice, and equality and international affairs. He is the founder and lead pastor of 6-8 Church in Durham, North Carolina. 6-8 vision is to build a gospel community that is intentional, diverse, cross-cultural, and neighborhood center by engaging and developing ministry in downtown Durham and the Haiti community. And now I present to you Dr. Dorrell Briscoe. Where are you?
Hi.
Oh, okay.
Hello. Thank you, Ms. Wallace. I appreciate the introduction and I'm honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I appreciate the work that the Rotary clubs all across this country, but especially in my area, do. And so we thank you for your volunteerism and your engagement in the community. I'm really grateful and super thankful to be here. I'm just going to jump right into it. I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time. Looking at about 15-20 minutes tonight, but I'm just sharing about the book that I published almost a year ago on May 31st. This book right here. It's called "There's a Storm Coming." There's a storm coming. How the American church can lead through times of racial crisis. Fun fact. Okay, I've never shared this in a presentation about my book before. But fun fact, I got that the title from a Batman movie. Which is really funny. It was the last Batman in 2013. Something in The Dark Knight Rises or whatever. But yeah, it was just a random quote from Catwoman who said that to Batman, and it's always stuck with me. So random. I've never shared that before, but yeah. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of superhero movies. But yeah, I wrote this book on May 31st, and how the American church can lead through times of racial crisis. You know, it really the impetus behind it came from two places. Hurricane Katrina in 2005. I was 20 years old. I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that we almost lost a great American city. I was shocked at the lack of preparedness, lack of leadership. It just stuck with me. In fact, I changed my major from international studies to political science, and then moved to Texas, and then moved to Louisiana because I was just so moved by that horrific tragedy. And then the other reason why I kind of published the book was because, you know, I've been in ministry for the last 10 years, and I've seen in a lot of churches a deafening silence when it comes to racial crises. This weird silence. And so, you know, the book is honestly meant, I think anyone can read it, and I think hopefully you'll get some good knowledge and information out of it. But the book was really meant for my white brothers and sisters who are faith leaders and genuinely want to respond and lead well during these times of crisis. And when I say crisis, I'm talking like, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile. I think, and I say this all the time, I think we've been living in a racial crisis in America since 1619, when the first African slaves were brought to the shores of Virginia, and just the legacy of all that. But when I'm talking about racial crisis, I'm talking about times where there's just an enormous amount of shock and outrage that is that occurs in our social political landscape in America. People are protesting. There's riots. It is a great time of social unrest. How can we lead well during those times? How can, at least from a faith standpoint, I think the book is broadly applicable to other organizations across the country. But as an organization, what are some things that we can do to be prepared for the next crisis? What are some things that we can do to be able to be in a position to lead well during this crisis? And so I just come up with a simple model in my book that was based from kind of my time in public policy before ministry. The model consists of 4 parts, 4 R's: realization, readiness, responsiveness, and renewal. I talk about that. And so, like, what do we need to realize as an organization when it comes to these crises? We have to realize that, number one, America has a deep and troubled historical record on race. And it's important for us to be educated within that record. It's important to watch documentaries and read books on America's historical record on race. And from that record on race, we have today, present day inequalities and systemic racism. So these are things that we have to realize. We have to read these statistics. We have to read these books that show disparities in every aspect of existence between Black and white people. We have to realize the lived experience of Black people in this country and the discrimination that they feel, the pain that they feel. So these are things that when it comes to preparing for a racial crisis, what do we need to realize that we just don't know right now? And in the book, I give some practical steps on some wonderful literature to get your hands on, and but also other people to follow and to learn from. It's critical that we realize these things when it comes to navigating racial crises well. The next step is readiness, and readiness consists of actionable steps that your organization can do to work for justice in your community. It talks about the importance of collaborating with community stakeholders. It talks about the importance of moving beyond just diversity into outcomes of inclusion and solidarity. It talks about, when it comes to readiness as an organization, what are we doing to hold the powerful accountable? How are we interacting with our local power establishments? And so that it's very, how can we as an organization invest and volunteer in Black organizations that are working for justice, and partner and collaborate with other community stakeholders to be in a place where if there's a crisis that occurs in our city, as an organization, we are beacons of healing and reconciliation and justice and solidarity, right? And so realization, what do we need to realize? And then as we realize these disparities, what can we do to be ready as an organization? The next part of the model there is responsiveness. How do we respond? I always say this to faith leaders and friends of mine. If 1,000 neo-Nazis marched in right down the street of your organization, what would you say? How would you react? What would be your response? So how do we respond as an organization when these crises, these racialized crises, that's what I call them in my book, these crises occur? I call them racialized crises or racial storm and racial storms. And I basically got the idea, and I'm sorry, going back to context here and background, but I didn't share this before. I'd love to share this, but I worked in public policy, but my expertise was in climate change adaptation and natural disaster resiliency. Basically, how can we help communities prepare for the next big storm so we don't have what we had in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina? So that was my background was looking at the ramifications of climate change and say, okay, what can we do? How can we build resiliency? I'm not interested in debating, theories, and I'm saying, hey, if a Cat 4 storm is barreling towards your coastal town, what are you going to do? How are you going to prepare? So that's why got this from, I kind of took these principles and strategies and knowledge from climate change adaptation and they intersected with an organizational standpoint, because I've been in an organization, I've led an organization, I'm leading an organization. What does it look like for us to prepare for this socio-political climate change that, in my opinion, is spawning and creating these powerful racialized storms, racialized crises? So I just want to just kind of share that. I'm a big context person, so how can we respond during a storm? And a lot of times, I've seen from organizational leaders, and I've seen and heard silence. Um, this lack of knowledge regarding the very real pain that people have in our communities. So realization, readiness, responsiveness, and then renewal. There's a big saying in the field of natural disaster resiliency. When a major climatic event occurs, it's not just about bouncing back, it's about bouncing forward. As a community, as a city, what does it look like to bounce forward from this crisis that we just had, right? So if I'm thinking about Minneapolis and the trial and George Floyd and Dante Wright, and oh my gosh, a couple of years before that, Philando Castillo, what are we doing as a community? The question I want to ask the mayor there, the police chief there, community stakeholders there, what are we doing to not just bounce back, not just to get back to a sense of normality? What are we doing to bounce forward as a community to have a greater understanding of some of these trigger points, a greater understanding of how our police system works and how our police force navigates and connects with Black and Brown communities, right? How can we renew? How can we use this catalytic event to produce the change that's needed now, whether within our organization or within our broader community? Again, this is very general here because I want this to be applicable to where you are individually and then where your organization is. So if you read the book, I intentionally make it generalized enough to give you an idea to be thinking out, a road, a map to travel down a certain road. And so renewal, how can we embrace the disruption and get to the adaptive transformational change that we need as an organization? A lot of times we can use great catalytic events to produce much needed change in America. For example, I mean, this the historical example, but the Civil War. The Civil War, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment were ratified, major steps into us becoming a truly democratic nation, right? Because we remember that the Black and Brown folks did not have the opportunity to join our democratic process for hundreds of years. But when we look at that major legislation ratification in the Constitution, I'm sorry, changes in the Constitution, that was on the heels of the costliest and deadliest war in American history, right? And so, what does it look like for us to embrace the disruption and the destruction and all these things, and get to needed change that is needed in our community, in our city, in our organization? So, realization, responsiveness, readiness, renewal, and I'm sorry, realization, readiness, responsiveness, and renewal. And it's exciting. I've had it's been, and I'm wrapping up here. But I've had a great opportunity to share this with pastors all across America, um, it's something that I think is needed. I think it's a conversation starter. How can we prepare for a racial crisis? What can we do to be bastions and beacons of hope and reconciliation as an individual and as an organization? I'm leading a church in downtown Durham, and we're having these conversations right now. I just connected with the police chief. I'm sorry, the sheriff, the Durham County Sheriff, just 3 weeks ago, and had a conversation with him. Hey, what are we doing about body cams? Hey, what are we doing about? Do we have a ban on the chokehold policy? What are we doing with this money? Can we hire some mental health crisis professionals to respond to non-criminal 911 emergency calls? Having these conversations, holding the powerful accountable, getting in the know of what are the practices of our local law enforcement. We're not trying to demonize law enforcement. How can we be a part of the much needed change that needs to happen from a relational standpoint with law enforcement and Black and Brown communities? And so yeah, it's exciting. And again, I appreciate you guys having me on. And we are a new church plant and a new church, new faith community in Durham. We've been in existence for about a year. In fact, our first weekly service was January 2020, and then go figure, we were shut down for COVID. So we've been virtual ever since. But we're primarily reaching young professionals and people in their 20s and 30s, and it's a multi-ethnic community of faith, and so it's really exciting. And so yep, I'll end it there and end it early. And if anyone has any questions.
Diane has a question. Diane, you got to unmute. Diane, I'm trying to unmute you. Diane? I can't, she had a hand up, but I can't, she's not unmuting herself. Diane? I can't unmute her. Does anybody else have any questions?
I do, Doris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Dr. Briscoe, I'm just curious, you use the 4 R's in dealing with racial tension, racial crises, but I assume that you could use the same 4 R's in dealing with any crisis. Is that correct? Or is there something much different about what you're talking about than other issues? You brought up climate change, for instance.
Yeah, thank you, sir. That's it. And I agree with that. I think that the model can be broadly applicable to different crises that occur. It starts with knowledge and awareness of the fault lines, right? The issues that are spawning and creating these crises. And then as you learn, as you listen, you're in a better position to get ready to be able to respond to the next storm. But it starts with knowledge, and then from that knowledge, we move into readiness. And once you're doing these, yeah, I think it's very applicable to it. And that's what I saw with some of these coastal communities I worked in, and in Texas and Louisiana and Florida. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Diana?
Well, I didn't have a question. I am sorry. I have this white rectangle that's over the video and audio, so I had to go out and come back in completely. Please excuse me. But I don't have a question.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions or comment?
I'll ask one more if I may, just a quick one.
Okay.
Just skipping over to the climate change one more time. How optimistic are you about our situation?
A racial standpoint?
No, I skipping over to climate change, just briefly.
Oh, goodness gracious. I'm no climatologist. I have a background, public policy background from it. So the science is not as strong as probably a policy standpoint. That being said, from what I'm sensing in our political climate, I think that there is a growing sense of reality and weightiness behind climate change. And I think that it's becoming a bit more mainstream to invest in alternative forms of energy and to reduce our carbon footprint, not just from like a economic standpoint, but even from like an ecological standpoint of the beauty of America and protecting our environment and climate. I think that's hopefully that's becoming more mainstream.
Okay.
Okay, Melissa, did you have a question?
Yes, hi. I'm really glad I got to visit tonight and see Dr. Briscoe. Is this a book that would lend itself to book studies, church book studies, or is it something that an individual would read on their own? Or can you talk a little bit about how one could take the knowledge and the concepts of the book and make them into experience?
Yeah, I've had numerous churches and organizations actually do this as a book club, and have decided, hey, we're going to use this as a catalyst to get some needed change and organizational trajectory when it comes to racial justice. And they've created from the book an idea and a plan based from where they are, with what they want to do. And so, yeah, I've had that happen before, and it's an honor. And then I've had just folks who are individuals and read it, and I'm like, man, yeah, like, what am I doing to be aware of things? How am I getting ready as an individual? Where should I respond? How should I respond when these, and so, yeah, I think it can be broadly applicable to individual in a corporate standpoint.
And so then that leads to my next question, which is, because we're Rotary, we're a Rotary club. And actually I saw that the Durham Rotary Club has a book club, and maybe they want to learn about your book. But I'm just interested because the way you presented it as something that churches need to do. And I guess I'm curious, does the audience need to be a church? How does being a church fit in to the a storm's a coming, get ready, all the principles? What's the overlap? Why is it the church? Why is
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, right. Great question. The first, the reason why I tailored the argument to the church, because I'm a pastor, I'm a minister, I'm a public theologian. I have my doctorate in ministry, and so and then that's where my experience is too. For the last 10 years, I've served as a pastor in a predominantly white evangelical setting. So I really wanted to write based from my experience and not just my knowledge, but working, knowledge and experience intersect. And that's where this book, that's what happens with this book. That being said, I do believe it can be applicable to corporations and organizations, but from the main drive, the fuel behind this was being a Black pastor in a white evangelical setting and seeing the anguish, the anxiety that my white friends had when it came to talking about race, especially in a Christian setting. There was silence, there was a disregard for the pain that Black people experienced. So that's what it was really meant, was a bit of a love letter written to my white brothers and sisters with like, hey, this is what you should be thinking about when these crises occur.
Okay, and so I really appreciate that reply, and that makes complete sense. And so the reason, it just seems like you need to, it would be wonderful for you to be aware that there are so many white people who don't go to any church, who are just dying about what's happening in America and what's happening with racism. And they're not necessarily responding with love. They might be responding with love to the predicament of the people of color, but they're not responding with love to the misinformation and the miseducation and the historical track record that has trashed everybody.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I just want to let you know that you have a very broad audience
Sure. Yeah. Mm.
of white people who don't have, how could we have a clue? You
Mhm.
know, especially given all the way misinformation is.
Mhm. Mm.
But to your point, education, reading books,
Mhm.
watching documentaries.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Does anybody else have any questions? Nobody else have any questions? Comments?
I wanted to thank Dr. Briscoe for being here this evening. And could you again share with us how to get your book?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Thank you. It's on Amazon. You can get it off Amazon.
Mhm,
You would just search "There's a Storm Coming,"
mhm.
that you can get it there. Yes, ma'am. I also do, if you're interested, I can do a signed copy. So if you email me, if you wanted a signed copy, I totally would be willing to do that. Hey, if you wanted faster within 2 days, I'll leave that to Jeff Bezos.
Okay, we'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Your email, I put it in there.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
I'll find it first. Okay, I find it. I'm gonna put it in there. But also, just while anybody else have any other questions that for the disaster relief fund, it's in the chat. So you just click those 3 buttons and then you hit it, and then you'll be able to pull it up.
Actually, you need to share it because it's for some reason the chat is only to you. There's no one, you can't chat with anybody else, so it's not to anybody else but you.
Okay, so I'm
You
gonna
could-
type
you
it in
could
again.
you could copy and paste it back in to everyone. If you just copy it and then you can paste it so you don't have to retype it all. But I would send it to the group, but I can't. It's just for you.
Oh, it didn't come back up. I copied it. Well, anyway, I send it out to everybody. Copy it. And now I'm pasting, trying. Oh, there it goes. Does everybody see it now?
No.
Well, I copied and I pasted what you said do.
Yeah. Maybe just email it, I guess.
Well, if I've emailed it already out about 2 times, but I re-emailed it again and send it out to everybody.
Okay.
That who didn't get it. So I sent it to the ones that okay, Richard, do you need it so that way I don't send to everybody all over again? Do you need it, Richard?
If you're talking to me, Doris, no, I don't need it because I use the address that was in your
Okay.
email.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Dr. Briscoe? Are there any more questions? Hear none, okay. So let me share here. We want to thank you for coming out, sharing this wealth of knowledge with us this evening. And so I'm going to unshare my screen. Let's see. I think I'm doing that.
Not sharing yet. You want to share your screen?
Okay, I thought that's what I did. I did.
It's not sharing yet.
Well, see, I didn't log in on the way I normally log in. I had to log in the other way, Zoom.us. So this is not the way that I normally sign in, log in.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had to log in a different way today. And it's not letting me.
Maybe you can mail it to him later.
Okay, Dr. Briscoe, but we have a thank you certificate for you. And we want to thank you for coming out, speaking with us this evening. And I hope this were education to everybody, and that we take away one thing, that we learned something more that we didn't know. And then when we know better, we do better. So I want to thank you so very much. And I will be mailing you the certificate. And also I'll be mailing out your email to everybody. And then I also will be purchasing a book though. So thank you so very much. And
Thank you.
right.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Diane, you said you are going to do the four-way test?
Yes. Okay. Of the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And is it beneficial to all concerned?
Okay, thank you, everybody. And so I'm gonna stop the recording now.